Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to the show. Jack Chow is hosting on East West with G&E TV. For quite a while, we haven't seen this great gentleman, a good friend of mine, Mr. Chris Nebe. Well, at least a good 2 or 3 months already, at least. And he is heavily engaged in China, doing another one. So to make this introduction more official, I would like to say, and director, producer, and a creator, and a director, and
writer.
And a writer, right, of all 3 beautiful films. You all recall sometime beginning this year, we're talking about a film that is created by Mr. Chris Nebe called Tibet the Truth.
Right.
And pretty soon we were talking about, after that, we were talking about Diaoyu Island, the truth, right? And this time, since he has just finished shooting, came back from Yunnan, China, is the Burma Road.
Flying Tigers.
Flying Tigers, right, good. So, number 1, welcome back. Number 2, welcome to the show. Number 3, congratulations to your huge success.
Thank you.
That's all I can say.
I must say I'm even surprised myself that my humble contribution to geopolitics of Diaoyu Island
I see, all right, sure.
Is so successful in
Speaking
China.
of Diaoyu Island, have you submitted your application to the Chinese American Film Festival?
Not yet, but I will.
You will, right?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
All right. You won the Oscar of the Chinese Film Festival last year with Tibet the Truth.
Yes.
For Best Documentary, right?
Right, yes.
And this year you're submitting your Diaoyu Island the Truth to the Chinese American Film Festival for this year's documentation.
Right.
I mean, documentary film, right?
Yes.
All right. I wish you good success in this one.
Thank
of
you.
course, same success. Right?
Thank you.
And then pretty soon you're going to do your Burma Road.
Yes.
The Flying Tiger.
Yeah.
Okay, good. To lots of my audiences, especially younger ones. When I say younger ones, I mean 40 years younger, 40 and below, might not even know what is the Burma Road, what is the Flying Tiger. To bring up little piece of education to my audiences, I mean young audiences, can you please give us a little background story of that period in history, what happened, and why is it called the Burma Road, why it is related with a dash, say, Flying Tiger?
Right. You see, the West has completely ignored the fact that China actually was an allied nation in World War II, and that China contributed with enormous sacrifices to the success of beating Imperial Japan in World War II. There have been films made about Burma Road and Flying Tigers, but they always have ignored that it was the Chinese people who created the infrastructure and enormous personal sacrifices. And because of the Cold War, which started right after 1945, that whole fact that China was an allied nation in World War II is basically ignored by Western historians, and most people are not aware of it. Most people also don't realize that actually World War II started after the Marco Polo incident Marco Polo Bridge incident in Beijing in 1937, and did not start, like most of the historians will say, with Hitler invading Poland in 1939.
I see.
So I thought that it was about time to educate the Western people about the fact that China indeed was an allied nation in World War II and deserves credit for what they did. when Japan invaded China in 1937 and continued very rapidly to expand throughout Southeast Asia, the British, who at that time controlled Burma, now called Myanmar, were supplying the Chinese army with urgently needed supplies. But they couldn't transport it because there was a very hilly terrain, mountainous terrain and jungle between Burma, the Burmese border, and Kunming.
There's no
China.
road for the transportation.
There was just a road, a horse trail, which was used for the normal horse caravans at that time. So the expert said, yeah, this will take about 8 years, provided you have all the machinery and all that.
And the money, of course.
And the money, of course. The Chinese managed to make a passable road in that almost impossible area in less than 1 year. In less than 1 year. By employing about 300,000 farmers, common people, children, women, and everybody who could walk, and was building that road. And that road was completed in less than a year, and then the British could transport by truck the urgently needed supplies from Burma. They landed it in Rangoon, then they transported it to Ledo by train, and from there it was trucked into Kunming. Yeah, and so that was a remarkable achievement.
It was whose design, whose money, and whose
Chinese, all Chinese
creation.
All Chinese.
All Chinese.
All Chinese with their bare hands. No machines, no nothing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is really...
How many laborers were you involved?
There were 250 to 300,000.
250 to 300,000.
They were recruited from the farms and so on. So we interviewed a few, which were now in the 90s. And then, after the Japanese had taken Singapore and Malaysia, they also took Burma. Then that road was closed, and now the Brits had to supply the Chinese army via the hump, meaning via the Himalayas by plane. But there were no airfields. And once again, hundred-thousands of Chinese swarmed out and built airports. In Lijiang, in G&E, all over at strategic places along the border of Burma, now called Myanmar. There are strategic airports, which were all built by hand again because there was no machinery. And the personal sacrifice of common Chinese people was enormous.
Huge.
And but they created the infrastructure for the American Flying Tigers, which were actually mercenaries. They were not regular army at first, because at that time America was not at war with Japan officially. We are talking late 30s, early 40s. And then once America became involved after Pearl Harbor, the Flying Tigers were integrated into the regular Air Force. And they did a good job, but they couldn't have done a good job if the infrastructure wouldn't have been there, which the Chinese created. And the purpose of this film now is, contrary to previous films who always glorified the contributions of the West, this film glorifies and not only glorifies but makes sure that the world realizes that number one, it was the epic struggle and contributions of the Chinese who defeated the Japanese and also created the infrastructure for the Americans to help them.
So, in other words, you discovered the history, this piece of history yourself.
Yes.
Right? With no aid, no nothing?
No, because you see, when you look at it in the West, everybody talks about Pearl Harbor and actually about the Pacific War. not much is known.
I see.
You know, very, very little is really known. I mean, people know that Japan, Imperial Japan victimized China and created terrible bloodshed and horrific war crimes, but nobody really relates to the fact that China was actually an allied nation of the West.
That's quite impressive. Back to my audiences. My friend Chris Nebe was born in Germany,
Right.
and he still remains a Germany citizen here on visitor basis. Yet, for him, not being told, not being instructed, not being funded, or not being given any of the historical information or document on his own totally, to do discovery after discovery after discovery, first on the Tibet issue, and the outcome is the Tibet, the truth, right? Second, on the Diaoyu Island issue, the outcome of which is Diaoyu Island, the truth. And then now talking about the Burma Road dash Flying Tiger, I would give you both thumbs up. And
Thank
it's a
you.
wonderful job, wonderful perspective, and I believe that's a big contribution to humanity. So stay with us. We'll be back talking about the film. So see ya.